So you're getting ready to purchase a home and you're really not sure how much it's actually going to cost you in the end. Hi, I'm Ryan Cook and I am the broker owner of HomeSmart First Class Realty, and I want to go over with you today a little bit of information about your loan estimate and your closing costs and why it's important to understand this stuff. So I got to go over a little bit of the basics. There's really three basic steps to obtaining financing to purchase a home: your pre-approval, your loan estimate, and then your closing disclosure, and it works in that order. All right. A real quick refresher: in your pre-approval, it's based on 5 basic things: your credit score, income, debt, assets, and interest rates available at the time. And you have to provide your social security number, last month of pay stubs, last 2 months bank returns, last 2 years taxes. And if you're like me and self-employed, last 2 years business taxes, plus 3 months purchase and profit and loss statements. And if you're getting any gifts, they need to know it's not an IOU. Now, the loan estimate: once you give 6 pieces of information to a lender, they are required by law to issue you a loan estimate within 3 days. Now, 3 of the pieces of information you've already given them as part of the pre-approval process: name, income, social security number. Now, once you give them a property address and a price and how much you want to borrow, now they're required to give you this 3-page document. It's going to identify your interest rate, your monthly payments, your closing costs, estimated to start with. And be very clear, it is not an approval or denial. It is just an estimate. And this is how you'll be able to compare one lender to another, because in the end there'll be an APR on there, and that includes all your fees. All right, so page 1, I'm not going to go through all this. It just has your information in here, your information, the type of loan you're looking at, estimated costs, estimated closing costs. Page 2, it's going to have some of your closing costs in here, which are at section 3 and 4, services you cannot shop for, services you can shop for. And then page 3, probably the most important, section 2, the second line down, annual percentage rate. This is how you're going to compare one lender to another. All right. And remember, I had another training on here talking about how a lender's paid. There's on the front and on the back. And on the back, you generally don't see. Well, this is the way you see it. You see it through the APR. Now, the closing disclosure, now this is once you've already signed purchase and sale, you've had your appraisal, you've made your application for lending, etc. Now we're 3 days prior to closing. Now, this is a very important document. 1, you're going to sign it at the closing, and 2, there's another couple things you really need to understand. First, you need to get this returned to your lender ASAP. And you may say, why? Why do I have to return it so quickly? It's critical. You cannot close for 72 hours after signing that document, required by law, federal law. So it's super important you get this signed and returned. Now, the reason why you also want to be concerned about this is, say, for example, your contract says you're going to close on a certain date. Well, if that date falls before the 72 hours, you won't make it. So you need an extension. And if the seller doesn't grant it, you failed to meet the terms of your contract, you could lose your deposit. Second is that if it goes more than 7 days, the lender's going to start the process all over again from square zero, gathering your information, bank statements, taxes, etc. It's ridiculous. It's a broken process, but that's the way it works. And then if you could go past your interest rate lock period. So if you go too far, you may have to pay a fee to extend your interest rate, and typically it's a point. So if you're borrowing $300,000, it's going to cost you $3,000 to extend your rate lock. There isn't like, oh, I'll just use the rate today. You can't. You have to extend it. Now, 5 pages in the closing disclosure. Again, I'm not going to do all this. I'm going to focus on the closing cost portion. But first page is very similar to the loan estimate. Has your information, the type of loan you're looking at, your monthly payment, and your closing costs. Page 2 has these are your closing costs, the services you can shop for and the services you cannot shop for. And I'll get into more of that later. But this is the section when people talk about closing costs. It's this section they're talking about. Page 3 is if you're getting any credits back from the seller. Page 4 is just some additional information. Same thing on 5, just where to get further information. And page 5 also, again, you see on here on the loan calculations on the left side, they have APR, and that's where you're going to note your APR. Also lists everybody and their licenses and who's involved in the transaction. So closing costs, it's broken down into services the buyer did not shop for and services the buyer did shop for. Now, the services you did not shop for, the fees associated with all the work needed to close the loan based on bank, federal, and state guidelines. Those are your appraisal fees, credit report fees, flood determination fees, just the bank's fees. Some things you just can't shop for because they're required by law to be done. Okay. Page two, continuing on the did not shop for. Also, things you can't shop for: recording fees. We use Registry of Deeds here in Massachusetts, and there's a fee for recording all your documentation. So you can't shop for that. You have to have to obtain a municipal lien certificate. So they're reaching out to the municipality, which is your city or town, and saying any of the services the town provides, say water or city sewer. A lot of those may be paid separately, but there'll be some that they collect at the closing. So they have to make sure they get a lien certificate from the town to make sure everything's been paid. And then there's a fee for putting that on record at the registry, and then also filing homestead, which is your protection, $250,000 for a single, $500,000 for a couple of equity protection against creditors. And then finally, your prorations and adjustments. So for example, your taxes and your oil. If you have oil, there's oil remaining in the oil tank. You generally got to pay the seller back for that oil. And then taxes, because we pay our taxes quarterly and we pay them in advance. So the seller will have already paid for the entire quarter. And if we're buying halfway in between, well, they need to get reimbursed from today to the end of the quarter, and that's going to come from you. You have to pay for that. Now, services you can shop for. Now, these are the fees associated with the professionals you've hired. So you have the choice of who you're hiring. Pest inspection fee they have listed on here. I've never seen that on there. That's always part of your home inspection. Survey fee, that's going to be dependent upon the attorney you're hiring or the bank you're hiring. You may be able to shop that around a little bit. Your title insurance. In Massachusetts, the closing attorney is the title insurance agent, and they collect a fee for doing that. And then your owner's title and your lender's title. So depending on the attorney, there may be slightly different insurance fees, depending on who they're working with. And you may be able to ask the attorney to get a quote from an other title insurance that they have a relationship with. So don't be afraid to ask your attorney about that. Title exam fees. Massachusetts would do quit claim deeds, which basically offers no protection to the buyer. It's crazy. And so we hire title examiners to make sure that the deed being transferred is solid. And so there's a fee associated with that. Courier fees, because the bank wants the copy of all the documentation, the wet signature documentation within 24 hours after closing. And then other lender fees. These are the on the front, your doc prep, processing, underwriting, stuff like that. And there's a wire transfer fee sometimes, or almost all the time, unless you're paying cash, because when the lender you're borrowing from, they're going to send the money, they're going to wire the money to the closing attorney you've hired. There's a fee associated with wiring that. Typically it's $30, $35 to do a wire. You get charged that wire fee. Finally, your homeowner's insurance, your real estate taxes, and any impounds. Impounds are monies held in escrow when your bank is paying for your homeowner's insurance and your taxes. So they'll impound some money. They take a percentage out with every payment that goes to an escrow account, and that's what they're doing here. So this is, when it comes down to lending, you really want to understand your loan estimate, your closing disclosure, the fees you can shop for so you can understand your closing costs. I'll do more in-depth training on the loan estimate, and I'll do more in-depth training on the closing disclosure at a later date. I just want to do it from a high level and give you a sense of what's involved when you're purchasing a home and the costs associated with it and how you compare one lender to another. And I am Ryan Cook. I'm the broker owner of HomeSmart First Class Realty. I am here for you to teach you what you need to know to be an educated buyer. Thanks for watching.